Good afternoon. Today we are going to build up on what we already learned on the gross premium, where we were able to define the gross future loss random variable, where we said that it represents the difference between the present value of future outgo and the present value of the future income. So we would want to see how we use that to compute premiums for this particular lecture. And we will use what we call the principle of equivalence, where under this principle, we expect that the expected value of the future outgo minus the expected value of the future income will give us a value of 0, simply meaning that the expected value of the present value of the future loss random variable should equate to 0. So you're able to see what we refer to as outgo. This is in terms of the benefits payouts for our contract, our assurance contracts, and the future income, we expect it in terms of premiums. So that go are the benefits. We also have the expenses attached to the contract, and the only income we anticipate from the contract is the premium. So we'll be using this principle of equivalence, where we'll be equating the present value of outgo, that is the benefits as well as expenses, should be equal to the expected present value of future income, and that is in the premiums. So it means that if we equate these two by this principle of equivalence, then it means that if you have values of, let's say, the expected present value of the future outgo, then you can be able to estimate the expected value of the future income. So that is what we shall be doing. So we'll do so for conventional contracts, then do it for with profit contracts. So we'll go straight on to an example. So this is another way to look at it. So again, this is the expected present value of premiums, which in our case, or from an insurer's perspective case, that represents the income. Then the expected present value of the outgo comes in terms of benefits that will be paid to the policyholders or their beneficiaries, as well as any expenses that will be incurred tied to that particular contract. So let's look at our first example. So you can look at this. So we'll have premiums can be paid in different scenarios, or you can have a single premium contract that is payable only by a single installment of premium, or you can have periodic premiums being paid annually, and mostly they usually are paid in advance, or you can also have contracts which are paid more than once within a year, let's say monthly, for instance. So look at all those scenarios. So let's begin with the first one, where we consider an annual premium contract. So our equation of value will be pegged on the expected present value of the benefit plus, remember our I symbolizes the initial expense, plus any periodic or annual expenses in this case. That's why we are considering the expected value for these expenses as an annuity, because they are paid periodically, annually. And then we have the final expense attached to the disbursement of the contract, or the claim expense attached to the contract. So all this represent the expected present value of the future outgo. Then on my right side, I have now the annual premium that is payable, the amount of G, and to determine the expected present value of that, then we discount, because we are expecting, or we want to be able to price this annual premium contract. So let's look at an example so that it is clear. So let us consider Gordon, who is aged 45 and who wishes to buy a whole life assurance policy with a sum assured of 10,000, payable immediately on death. So we're going to calculate the gross premium that Gordon needs to pay annually in advance for 10 years or until his earlier death, using the principle of equivalence according to the following basis. So this first statement here gives us the type of contract, which is a whole life, and it is issued to a life aged 45, and the sum assured payable is 10,000. And we want to see how can we be able to calculate the gross premium that he needs to pay in advance for 10 years or until his earlier death. So in this case, we want to look at the amount of premium that Gordon will pay within this 10 years first. And then the basis. So the basis provides us with more information. It provides us with the mortality table we're going to use, what we refer to as the mortality basis. It also gives us the corresponding interest rate, which we shall be computing the expected present value of our contract with, as well as any expenses attached to the contract. So we look at the basis. So we have an initial expense of 160 plus 75% of the annual premium. So this is an initial expense. So it is 160 and 75 of the annual premium. So if I denote my annual premium with P, then it means that the initial expense, which will only be payable once, will be the 160 plus 75% of P, where P is unknown, and that is what we actually want to determine. Then the next is a renewal expense of 50. And this renewal expense, as the name suggests, it is going to be incurred periodically. And then in brackets, we are told that it is incurred throughout life from year 2 onwards. So this means that it is not payable within the first year. And therefore, we'll need to take care of that so that we can consider that this payment of 50 is being paid annually, but from year 2 onwards. So it's a renewal expense of 50 plus 4% of the annual premium. So that is an amount of 4% P, which again is incurred at the time of payment of each premium from year 2 onwards. So we need to get rid of the first year once we come to determining the EPV of the expenses. The next basis is claims expense of 2.5% of the sum assured incurred when the benefit is payable. So this amount is only payable once at maturity of the contract, and it being a whole life contract, then it is only payable when death occurs. So it will be attached to the sum assured of 10,000, which was our sum assured here. And then we're told that we're using M92 ultimate mortality at 4% per annum interest. So by the principle of equivalence, our equation of value should be such that the EPV of premiums should be equivalent to the EPV of benefits plus the EPV of expenses. So the best way to tackle this question is to compute each of these expected present values independently and then apply the equation of value of the principle of equivalence equation. So we'll begin with my left side here, the EPV of premiums. So we go back to our question. So we were told that it is actually a whole life and it is issued to a person age 45, where sum assured is 10,000, but we are going to calculate the gross premium that Gordon needs to pay annually in advance for 10 years or until his earlier death. So Gordon is not going to pay any premiums beyond the age of 55. So premiums are stopping after 10 years, whether he's still alive or if death occurs earlier, then that will be taken care of. But if he lives, if he continue, or if he dies past the age of 55, he still is entitled to the sum assured, but there will be he will not be paying any premiums past the age of 55 or past the 10 years. So therefore, if we denote P to be our known amount of premium, then the present value of the premiums will be P A due 45 for the next 10 years. So this takes care of that fact. So if we didn't have if we had that, if the statement was such that we are going to calculate the gross premium that Gordon needs to pay annually in advance until the contract matures, then in that case, we'd simply have a due 45 because this is a whole life contract. But because by the time this policy is being issued to Gordon, he's aged 45, so it is likely that by the time he's getting to 55, he will have retired and no longer will be able to pay for the premiums. So it's possible to structure a contract, a whole life contract, where you target old people and have them pay for their premiums earlier in advance before they reach an age where they can no longer afford to pay for the premiums. So that is the scenario that we have here. So I'm saying that if this was a normal whole life contract where the premiums are payable annually in advance until the contract matures, then we'd have this as A due 45 instead of A due 45 10. So this is limited to 10 because in this particular case, the annual premiums that are payable in advance will only last for 10 years. So once you have this equation, the rest is substituting for the formulas correctly as they are. And this is why I said revisit your ACS 222. Yeah. Because once you understand how to construct this, the rest is now substituting for the formulas correctly. So ensure you confirm that these are the correct values from your AM92 ultimate mortality table. Now, if we move on to now the expected present value of the benefits. So we are told that let's consider Gordon, who is aged 45 and wishes to buy a whole life assurance policy with a sum assured of 10,000 payable immediately on death. So that statement has quite a lot. We are getting the age, we're getting the type of contract, we're getting the sum assured of the contract, and we're also told the point in time at which the contract is being paid. So it is immediately and not the end of the year of death. So for this question, the EPV of the benefits simply becomes the sum assured. Let me scroll. So we'll have it as the sum assured, which is the 10,000 times A bar 45. So we're having it as A bar simply because this contract pays the sum assured at it pays the sum assured immediately. So we need to have so it is payable immediately on death, and that's why we have the bar. And then we have our age X here, which is age 45. So again, you can approximate your A bar X and write it in terms of AX using the acceleration factor, which is 1 plus I raised to a half. Then you can read this value directly from your AM92 ultimate mortality table. So again, confirm that the figures are correct so that it gives you this as your EPV for the benefits. So we now move on to expenses, and there are quite a number of expenses incurred here. So we have the first one. We have the first one, which is an initial expense of 160 plus 75% of the annual premium. So by that in itself, it is an initial expense payable only once. So first of all, the amount of 160, remember we are looking for the EPV, which is the expected present value as at today. And this being the initial expense at the point at which the contract is being priced, then its present value continues to be 160. The next amount we are told is plus 75% of the annual premium. So we already denoted our premium to be P. So that will be 75% of P, which is 0.75 P. So we've taken care of the initial expenses. So we are told that renewal expenses of 50 incurred throughout life from year 2 onwards. So Remember this renewal expense, it is the fact that we're told it is incurred throughout the life from year 2 onwards, so it is not attached to the premium payment, but as long as the life continues to be alive, that renewal expense will continue to be earned irrespective of whether Gordon has stopped paying the premiums. Remember, the premiums are stopping after 10 years, but it doesn't mean that after 10 years, Gordon will be dead. So even if they continue to live past the 10 years, that is, let's say to age 60, they will still pay a renewal expense of 50 because it is being incurred throughout the life from year 2 onwards. So it means in that case, we'll have it as ADU 45 and we won't have any angle 10 whatsoever in that case. And we're subtracting this one because we want to consider this renewal expense to be only payable from year 2 onwards. So that takes care of that particular expense. Then we go further and we are told that 4%, so again, it's another renewal expense, plus 4% of the annual premium. So in this case, this 4% is now attached to the premium, which we saw was only being paid for 10 years. So it will still be 4% of P, what we have here, but this is only being paid for 10 years, except for the first year. So that's why you can see our discounting factor here is AD 4510 because the 4% is attached to the premium, which are only being paid for 10 years, but we need to subtract this one because it is only starting from year 2 onwards. So we can look at the next expense, which is the claims expense. And this claims expense is 2.5 of the sum assured. So again, this would be 2.5% of our sum assured, of the EPV or sum assured, which is what we had earlier determined in the EPV of the benefits. So once you have this, the rest is now substituting directly in the formulas. These values are tabulated and then solving for the expected present value of the expenses. So once you have EPV of premium, EPV of benefits, EPV of expenses, then you can fit your equation of value. So you can see the only unknown here is P. This is already a full amount in itself. So we are going to be solving for P. So you can see there's also a P there. So what we're trying to solve is for the gross premium denoted by P, and this is our final answer. So if the sum assured was, in this case, so this is a note. So if the sum assured is paid immediately on death and premiums are paid continuously, so we would still maintain our equation of value. What would change? We would now have our expenses having the bar because we now use the continuously payable annuity. Also, the premiums will also have the bar because we are now considering the continuously payable annuity. So we can also calculate this using the select mortality. The principle of equivalence still remains the same. The way we define the contract still remains the same. What will now change is how we read our values depending on the select period. So if we consider this question, so we have that a 25-year endowment assurance policy provides a payment of 75,000 on maturity or at the end of the year of earlier death. So calculate the annual premium payable for a policyholder who effects this insurance at exact age 45. So this is, we are now dealing with an endowment lasting for 25 years with a sum assured of 75, and this amount is only payable at the end of the year of death. And this policy is being paid with annual premium which is now being paid, and it is issued to a life who is aged 45. So in this case, when you're told that you're calculating the annual premium payable for the policyholder, when it is not mentioned that the premiums are paid continuously, then you assume that premiums are collected or paid in advance. So again, the bases are provided here. So we have expenses as 75% of the first premium. So that is a one-off. And then 5% of each subsequent premium, plus an initial expense of 250. Then you're using MH2 Select Mortality and 4% per annum interest. So we can evaluate. We begin with the EPV for premiums, then we look at the EPV of benefits, and finally the EPV of expenses, and then apply the principle of equivalence or the equation of value. So our premiums, so you have said that we are considering these premiums to be payable in advance, so therefore we are going to be using an annuity due. And since this contract is lasting for 25 years and it is issued to a 45-year-old, so in this case, we're not told that the premiums will stop being paid at any point in time. So this life will continue to pay premiums until the contract matures, either on death or on survival to the end of the 25-year term. And therefore, it means that the EPV of my premiums will be P, again to denote the premiums, ADU 45 select angle 25. So it is the life, the age of the policyholder that is usually select. So once we come to substitute or to apply this formula, we know that ADU x angle n, we usually have it as ADU x minus d of x plus n divided by dx ADU x plus n. So what we need now to determine, remember for AMH2, the select period is 2 years. So once it gets to x plus 2, the life ceases to be a select life. So if we substitute, so my first case, that is AX. So in this case, my AX is simply, this is ADU X. My ADU X will be ADU 45, and it will remain to be select because this policy is issued to this life age 45, and they are being issued to it with the policyholder when their lives are actually select. So our select duration here is 0. So the life continues to be select. Then we have, so it should be a minus dx plus n. So if you sum, this is my x here, this is my n. If you sum the two, it gives you 70. And our select period is now, or the select effect has weathered off. So we now have it as D70 without the select option. For denominator, usually it takes the form of dx, which remains as D45 select. Then we have a due x plus n. Again, the select period has been surpassed, and therefore we'll still have it as a due 70 without the select period. So that is the only difference. Otherwise, you read the correct values, paying attention to the select tables. In this case, where you have the ages as select, that is at age 45. So we can look at now the EPV for the benefits. So the benefit is 75,000, payable on maturity or at the end of the year of earlier death. So in that case, we're using the endowment assurance, which is 25-year. Our sum assured is 75,000. So we multiply that with the corresponding EPV for the endowment assurance, payable at the end of the year of death. So we do not have the bar here. And it is issued to a life age 45 for a period of 25 years. So we know we can express an endowment in terms of the summation of a term and a pure endowment. And when we have it as a term here, we can now express a term assurance contract so that we're able to read most of these values directly from the table. We can express this term uh, assurance here in terms of a whole life and a deferred whole life. So this is again to simplify our expression, and you know we can express our terms in terms of the D function as this. So again, once you have the select period surpassed, your life ceases to be select, and that's why you can see everywhere I have it as x plus n, then the life ceases to be select, and I use the function or the age as non-select. So ensure you go and confirm these values from the tables and refresh on how you read the select mortality table. So we have expenses. So we had expenses are 75% of the first premium and 5% of the subsequent premium plus an initial expense of 250. So it means that our EPV of the expenses will be the 75 of P. So it will not have any annuity attachment to it because it is only payable once. And then we have 5% of the premium. And this 5%, if we go back, we are told that 5% of each subsequent. So it means that the first premium will not have this 5% attached to it. Otherwise, for the first premium, it will be the 75. But now from the second premium onwards, it will be 5%. So we need to get rid of the first term so that our EPV for that expense will be 5% P, AG 4525 minus 1, plus now the initial expense of 250. So again, ensure you solve for this, substitute it in the equation of value, and then solve for the unknown P, which is what we required. So we can now look at a situation where we have a with profits contract. So in this case, it means that we'll be expecting our contract to be growing by a certain percentage, or our sum assured to be growing by a certain rate. So if we begin at the very inception of the policy, such that our sum assured is S, then in the next year, we'll expect our sum assured to grow by a certain bonus rate, which we can, let's call our bonus rate B per annum, so that we are speaking of reversionary bonuses which are payable periodically within the contracts. So it means that if this person died within the first year between ages X and X plus 1, they will receive a sum assured of S. In the event that they survive, but they die between ages X plus 1 and X plus 2, they will have earned their first bonus. So the correct sum assured will be the initial sum assured plus S times B, which is what we have here. So this will progress on. So if they survive and then they die between ages X plus 2 and X plus 3, it means now their sum assured will now be S into 1 plus B squared. So this will continue growing as such. So this is the scenario we want to be able to evaluate. So our expenses, initial as well as renewal and any claimed expenses will remain as we had valued them, because this with profits contract only affects the sum assured, which is what we are assuming will be growing by a certain rate. The premiums again will still remain the same. So all we need to determine is how do we modify our 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 sum assured. So if you look at this equation, I can factor out my term of S as well as my term of 1 plus B, which if I did So I have my S there, and if I factor out 1 over 1 plus b, then in my first term, I will have to introduce the term of 1 plus b, so that if I open this bracket for my first term, this and that will cancel out, and what we'll be left with is S v qx, which is what we have here. So we want to write this equation of value in a simpler form so that we can see what it simplifies to. So if I factored out this, it means that for my second term here, I will have to square this so that I have this as 1 plus b squared, so that if I want it to go back to what we have there, multiplying this term by that term gives me originally what I had. So you can continue with that for the entire equation. So that now you will see that whatever I have here in the curly brackets, within the curly brackets, if I combine this term of 1 plus b times v, remember in terms of interest, v is simply 1 over 1 plus I. So it simply means that I can combine this 1 plus b and the v to now become a new discounting factor, which we can call v star, so that it now corresponds to another EPV of the benefit, or another AX function, but now being computed at a different rate, where we can call the rate J. So we are saying that we can summarize this entire expression that is in the curly brackets as simply AX J, where this J here denotes the rate such that if I was to compute 1 plus J raised to negative 1, that is the discounting factor with respect to J, that factor should be equivalent to 1 plus B divided by 1 plus I. So that in that case, if I wanted now to determine the exact new rate of interest at which I'll be computing this assurance benefit, I will simply make my J the subject, which is going to be given by this expression. So it means that I will be able to express my new J rate in terms of the interest rate and the bonus rate using this equation. So let's look at now an example where we can apply this. So a man aged 45 buys a 15-year with profit endowment assurance with a basic sum assured of 25,000. So this we have been it is confirmed that it is now with profits. So determine the single premium. So the premium is only payable once, to be paid for this assurance, assuming a simple reversionary bonuses of 6% per annum vests at the end of each policy year, and that death benefits are payable at the end of the year of death. Also assume that AM92 mortality and at 4% per annum interest. Then again, another basis is that initial expenses are 200 and renewal are 30 at the start of each policy year, excluding the first year. So for this, because we want to see how the with profits affects the benefits, we can start off with the EPV for the benefits. So we are told it is issued to this man who is aged 45, and it's for a 15-year term. And then the basic sum assured is 25,000, but this 25,000 will continue to increase by 6% per annum. So it means that the basic sum assured is 25,000, but now this amount will be increasing by 6% of the 25,000, which now becomes 1,500. So in this case, because we know an endowment can be paid in two ways, either upon death within the term or upon survival to the maturity of the term of maturity. And if death occurs within the contract, then it means that it will stop also accruing any bonuses. So we need to express our endowment in terms of the term assurance contract as well as the pure endowment contract, because these increments will only continue if this man is alive. And in so doing, the basic sum assured attached to the term will now be the 25,000 less the 1,500. And why we are lessing this amount is simply because we are going to include it once we come to add. So these two, if you sum these two, if death occurred within the first year or after the first year, it means that the corresponding amount of sum assured that will be payable will be the 23,500 plus 1,500. So it means we are splitting. Remember, it represents the same thing, which is the sum assured. So we are splitting our sum assured into the constant part and the increasing part. So for the constant part, we'll have to less the amount by which our cash flow is increasing by. So we less from 25,000, we'll less our 1,500, so that we obtain 23,500, and this will be discounted with respect to the term benefits. And then we'll have for the increasing part, it will still be a term function, which will be increasing by 1,500. So the sum of these two gives us the EPV of the benefit of the term assurance benefit part. And now for the pure endowment, this person must survive so to the end of the term. So they will have already earned 1,500 times the 15 years they will have been holding this particular contract, plus the basic sum assured. So that should come to the 47,500. And of course, now for the discounting factor, that becomes that for the pure endowment. So this is now how we revise for the with profit types of contract. So again, for simplicity, so that you're able to read these functions from the table. So it means that if I was to express this amount and split it in such a way that, so this is here is a term, and this here corresponds to a pure endowment. And again, we already know the combination of a term and a pure endowment gives us an endowment. So if I was to express this 47,500 times the EPV for the pure endowment into two terms, and the first term will be 23,500 A4515 with the stress on 15 plus 24,000 A45 angle 15 with the stress on 15. It means I will now have, I can sum the 23,500 A angle 45 15 with the stress on 45 plus the 23,500 A45 angle 15 with the stress on 15, so that those two, once I combine them, they will correspond to 23,500 with the endowment assurance mean present value. So that what will remain will now be 24,000 A45 angle 15, the stress on 15. Then the middle term for the increasing part remains as it was. So we are splitting the pure endowment part to constitute of a sum of 23,500 and 24,000, so that I can combine the 23,500 for the pure endowment with that of the term to form the endowment part, so that this can be read directly from the tables, and you can obtain this parts of the pure endowment by expressing your functions in terms of the D. And now for the increasing part, again revisit your ACS 222, so that this is now the correct expression, which you can now read your values. respectively from the tables. So that once you solve for that, then your EPV, you can substitute directly to obtain this as your value. So again, so we have looked at the EPV of the benefits. So we now want the EPV of the expenses. So we go back to our question. So in our question, we had been told that initial expenses are 200. So that's one-off, that's a one-off expense. And renewal expenses are 30 at the start of each year, excluding the first year. So given that it is an endowment, it means, so we begin with the 200. The renewal expenses will only be for the 15-year period. So we need to have this, but we need to subtract the first years because the renewal is excluding the first. So this is now expression for the EPV of the expenses. Now, we had been told determine the single premium to be paid for this assurance. So if it's a single premium being paid at the very outset of the contract, so it means that the expected present value of that contract, of that premium, will simply be an amount of P. So the EPV of the premium is simply P. And therefore, if we now apply the principle of equivalence, it means that my P will be equivalent to the summation of the EPV of benefits as well as the EPV plus the EPV of the expenses. So the sum of these two will be equal to my P. So we can also have scenarios where premiums are payable M times per year, and our contract or the equation of value will change to be in such a form. So this is a case where we're expecting a whole life assurance contract to be paid immediately on death. So, and that is guided by our A bar here attached to the sum assured. And also, so it means that our claim expense will also have it as with an A bar. But now in this case, the premiums themselves are payable M times per year. So we have A due MX, A due MX, like so. So we can look at a question. So Sam, age 40, buys a 20-year term assurance with a sum assured of 150,000 payable immediately on death. So calculate the quarterly premium payable by Sam for this policy. Assume that the initial expenses are 60 of the total annual premium plus 110, and renewal expenses are 30 per annum from year 2 onwards. The bases are RM92. Select. Always remember to read the correct tables, and 4% per annum interest. So we can begin with the EPV of premiums. We are told that in this case, we are calculating the quarterly premiums that are payable by Sam, and this policy is being issued to a 40-year-old, and it's for a 20-year term contract. So these quarterly premiums cannot go past 20 years. So we need to take care of that. So it means, assuming this was an annual premium, would simply have it as P A due 40 20. So to cater for the quarterly aspect, so it means that in this case, my premium will be paid, or Sam will pay by the premiums 4 times within a year. So I'll have this as 4, and therefore the annual premium will be 4P, because this P denotes the quarterly premium. So in a year, it means that I will receive 4, or he will pay 4 quarterly premiums. And this takes care of the discounting factor, where you're now discounting 4 times within a year. So you can, the formula for this, I think are provided for in the tables. So you have the correct substitution for those formulas and approximations of the premiums that are payable M times. So you can use that so that you can substitute for the corresponding correct period using the formulas as given. So the only thing that was changing in this case is how do we factor in the aspect of premiums being paid more than once a year, which in this case being quarterly premiums. So that if we were speaking of calculate the monthly premium payable by some for this policy. So it means that we'd have for the 12 there, we'd have 12 and we still have 12 at that point. So you can again verify these values from your tables. That is the AM92, select tables. Notice this difference. So once you have dx plus n, the life ceases to be select, and therefore you're reading D60 and not D60 select. So for the EPV of premiums, once you solve, you should obtain this as your value. So we can look at the EPV of benefits. So we are told that Sam, aged 40, buys a 20-year term assurance with a sum assured of 150,000, payable immediately on death. So this amount is payable immediately on death. So every time you see an assurance contract that is paying immediately on death, then what you should know is that you're dealing with an ABA for the respective contract. So this is our sum assured, and we have an ABA there to denote that the policies or the sum assured is payable immediately on death. And because we are looking at a term contract, then we have 40-20 with a stress on 40, so that it means that death must occur before the term is over. So again, using the acceleration factor, then we can express this in terms of a 40-20, the stress on 40, so that this becomes my expression. And the rest is now substituting for the correct values from the tables. So we can now look at expenses. So we have assume initial expenses are 60% of the total annual premium plus 110. So this 60 is a one-off, the 110 is a one-off, and the renewal expenses are 30. So these ones will occur periodically, annually for that case, from year 2 onwards. So it is from year 2 onwards up to a limit of 20 years. And again, this is attached to the life who is aged 40. So it means that my EPV of the expenses will be 60% of the annual premium, which is 4p, plus 110, plus the renewal expenses, and we must subtract 1 to get rid of the first year, so that we have that as our equation. And once you solve using equation of value, you can obtain your premium as 108. So we can now look at an annuity case. So the same approach follows. So an annuity of 8,500 per annum is to be paid monthly in advance for the remaining lifetime of Mrs. S, who is currently aged 60. So calculate the single premium that should be paid for this annuity, allowing for initial expenses of 1.5% of the premium, and administration expense payable at the start of each year, including the first. Administration expenses are 120 at the start of year 1 and increases by a rate of 1.9 per annum, and we are assuming M92 select and 6% per annum interest. So again, we split EPV of benefits, EPV of premium, EPV of expenses. So because it's a single premium, the expected present value of the premium will still remain to be the value of the unknown P. So we can look at now the EPV of benefits. So in this case, being an annuity, the benefit is this amount that is being paid to Mrs. S which is 8,500. And this amount is being paid monthly in advance. So it means that we are dealing with a due 12. So this means that this amount of 85 is being paid 12 times per year. And this Mrs. S is currently aged 60. And we are using the AM92 select. So this age needs to be 60. So we are going to be computing this at 6%. So that one is direct. So that is the EPV of our benefit. So you take care of the fact that it is being paid monthly and the aspect of select mortality. So again, this approximation is available in your tables, which is what we have in this section. So we can look at now the EPV of the expenses. So we are told that allowing for an initial expense of 1.5% of the premium. So first of all, my 1.5% of the premium will be simply 1.5% of P, which is what we have there. And then an administration expense payable at the start of each year, including the first. So these administration expenses are 120 at the end of year one and increasing by a rate of 1.9231 per annum. So it means that if I was to write that cash flow, it will be 120 for the first year. Then the next year it will be 1 plus my 1.9231% here, which will be equivalent to what we have there. But now this is only payable if the life survives from age 60 to 61, and therefore we need to discount for that amount. So we continue on. So it will increase again by this squared. We need to discount that to times 0, and this is only payable, or these expenses will only be incurred if the life continues to be alive from age 60 to 62. So that will continue on. So that what we have here in the brackets, you can see it now forms. It forms what? It forms an annuity due for that matter. So it's an annuity due again to a life age 60. But what is the difference? It is no longer being computed at 6%, neither at 1.923%, but at a known rate J, such that if you were to write the discounting factor in terms of J, which would be 1 plus J to the power of -1, that should be equivalent to or equal to 1.019231 divided by 1.06. So that's how you're going to be determining your J. If you make your J the subject in that equation, then it should come to 4%. So you'll be computing this ADU60 select at 4%, which is provided for in your tables, and then you can now solve. So once you have that, again, you simply now express it in your equation of value. The EPV of premium should be equivalent to the EPV of benefit plus the EPV of expenses, and then you can solve for the unknown premium P. So that marks the end of our premium, of our pricing. So you can see the underlying principles are the same. You determine the EPV of premium, EPV of benefits, EPV of expenses, and then you apply the principle of equivalence, where you simply equate the EPV of premiums to the EPV of benefits plus the EPV of expenses. And what you need to note is the corresponding assurance you're dealing with, the mortality basis in terms of whether it's ultimate or select, and the correct interest rate. Also note whether it's an annual premium, whether it's a premium that is payable M times within a year, and also note whether the assurance benefit is payable at the end of the year of death or immediately. So in our next lecture, we shall have the gross premium reserves. That is what we shall begin with. So next week we shall sit our CATs, our CAT 1, that is So ensure you prep for the same. It shall be inclusive up to what we have covered today. So if you have any questions, always post them in the chat room that I created so that I can get back to you in good time.